Hi, PowerCon. Thank you so much for coming out to this discussion with the amazing writers of She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. My name is Rebecca Goldberg. I'm one of the creative executives on the show at DreamWorks. Thanks, guys. And it is incredible that we launched less than a year ago, and since then we've dropped 3 seasons and have had such an amazing reception, and we're so excited to be here, so thanks for having us. So I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. First, we have writer and script coordinator Shane Lynch. Staff writer Laura Sreebny. Staff writer M. Willis. Story editor Katherine Nolfi. Story editor Josie Campbell. And EP and showrunner Noelle Stevenson.
Buddy? Ooh, there we go. Now we're talking.
So after that quick intro, do you guys want to introduce yourselves and your path to She-Ra, and if you had any relationship with the property beforehand?
I think Shane would love to talk about that.
So I grew up watching She-Ra, born in '85, so that reveals a lot about me. One of my strongest memories was the episode where Small One got turned into Flutterina, which was really traumatizing for me. But also, as I just revealed to my co-writers, my first cartoon crush was Skeletor. That's my truth.
All right. I'm Laura Sreebny, one of the writers. I did not admittedly have history with She-Ra. I had an older sister, but she didn't watch it. Didn't work out in my house. But my path was, I was working at DreamWorks on a different show, and I remember, you probably don't, Noelle, but there was an elevator, and Noelle Stevenson was in it, and I was like, are you Noelle Stevenson? Said yes. I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm developing She-Ra. So I called my agents, like, as soon as I got out of the elevator, I was like, you gotta get me a meeting on this show. Like, whether I'm invited, I will be there. And I wormed my way in.
I also was born in the 80s, and so I grew up mostly with He-Man. My dad, he and I would watch the movie more often than most people needed to see that movie. But my big fandom growing up was Star Trek, and She-Ra kind of, getting to be a part of the show and the world building that we got to do has kind of aligned a lot of the things that I loved and grew up with. And then my path was actually through Rebecca. She and I were assistants together forever ago. And so when she was working alongside this crew, she kind of was the one that set us up. Great.
Hi, I'm Katherine. I was not a precocious child, so I did watch She-Ra, but my memory was just like, pretty colors, girls. I loved it so much. And so when the opportunity came up to write, so stopped.
Yeah. I'm Josie. I didn't watch the show when I was a kid, but everybody I knew had the toys, which at the time I was a big Sailor Moon fan and truly thought She-Ra was one of the Sailor Scouts. And it was just like, oh, she's just in this season that's still in Japan and never came out. And then later on got the edification and watched it and loved it. And I came in because Noelle told me, hey, I'm developing a She-Ra show. Come work on it for me. And I said, absolutely.
That is exactly what happened.
It's literally what happened.
Josie was actually my very first phone interview when I was in comics.
Yeah.
She called me on the phone, and it was a big moment for me.
Yeah, because I used to work for Comic Book Resources as a reporter. So way years back, I called, I think, College Noelle to interview you.
I was on my futon.
That's okay. I think I was in my car.
Yeah. You're getting all the coolest Easter eggs here, PowerCon. The time Josie and I talked on the phone. So I didn't actually grow up with She-Ra. I was actually born after She-Ra came out. But it was something that I'm one of 5 kids, a mix of boys and girls. So it's like when you have that many kids and all the neighborhood kids just keep coming in, you end up with a lot of toys. So I had a He-Man and a Skeletor. I didn't know who they were. But they were like a little too big to play with my Star Wars action figures, but like sometimes they would make appearances and it would be like, I was like, all right, Muscle Guy and Skeleton Guy are gonna go on a trip with Qui-Gon Jinn and it's gonna be great. But yeah, I think actually as an adult, I started getting into Masters of the Universe because I was on a different show. I was on Wander Over Yonder, and we just kept doing He-Man homages. And I was like, okay, I guess I have to like learn what this is if I'm gonna write this. So then like after that, when they reached out to me for She-Ra, I was like, this is perfect. This is like I've been getting into this anyway, and it's like the perfect opportunity.
Awesome.
And then I pitched it.
That went great. So this panel is called Inside the Writer's Room. Can you tell us what it's like in the She-Ra Writer's Room? What is it like breaking a story?
It's like this, but we're all in beanbags. I think one time we were all in an elevator and we were doing some kind of interview, and the person who was supposed to be wrangling us, we're all just in the elevator and we're all just talking so loud that we're basically screaming. And she's like, "How did you get anything done?" I'm like, "I don't know."
I do
productive screaming.
I do think that like all of the like board artists like told me later they could hear everything we were saying in the room, so they were like getting ready and like making their own art as they hear us like screaming at each other. Well, what about?
I do think also like we would start out really talking about our lives as teenagers and like what really resonated for us and what we would have liked to see on. So there was maybe some oversharing happening in between the screaming.
It's basically just informal therapy for all of us.
Yeah. It's much cheaper.
Well, I think not just about our childhoods, but like stuff we're dealing with today too, like taking in modern politics, but also like adult friendships and navigating some of the complexities of what it is to, you know, grow apart from different people or have struggles and conflicts with like the people you really care about, and bringing that into the writer's room and kind of, again, being our therapy session of talking about that.
Mommy. Lots of mommy issues to deal with.
So many mom issues.
But it'd be fun to say after season 3.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, guys. But yeah, I mean, like, we'd get in the room, we'd spend like 2 days, basically. Like, one day would literally a brainstorm where we talked about everything possible that'd be involved in the episode, like what characters, the themes, what would happen, like, and like, you know, how we felt about it. And then spent a day like actually like doing the nitty gritty, like figuring out like at what point does Angela Sieglemer disappear, or what point does this happen? But it's always fun. Like the brainstorm days are always the most fun because those are the days we just like cut loose and we're like, what's the most fun to be had on the show? And like also, what's the most heartbreaking thing we could possibly do to every single one of these characters?
Yeah, I think my favorite parts of brainstorming is like every time before we break a new chunk of episodes, we have like a week where we just throw out pie in the sky. In an ideal world, what do you want to see from this season? And so like that's kind of fun because we don't actually have to like be in the writer's room for that. Mm-hmm. So we'll go on like field trips. We'll go to someone's house and just watch all our favorite episodes of our favorite shows and be like, I want to do something like that. I want to do something like that. Sometimes we just go to the pool and we pretend we're working, but we're just at the pool. But it's helpful because writing is so much more than just sitting in a room. I really do feel like the more that you go out and you find times to relax and just have fun together, but it's also like that's when something will hit you out of nowhere and it's like, oh my God, we gotta do that. Yeah.
So I carpooled here with Shane, so I'm gonna bring up something she said, which this is very common in a writer's room, me taking credit for your comments.
This hurts. This is very painful.
But you were talking about, and I agree with this, something that was really amazing that Noelle did. She really opened the room up to the rest of the crew. Mm-hmm. And so often we would invite designers and artists and the directors to like come in and talk to us about like what they want to see in the show. And I thought that was a really special thing.
Cool. Yeah,
so
it's cool because sometimes members of the crew would also just come to one of us, like come to you or to me, and just be like, I really love this character. I see myself in this character, maybe. That happened with Entrapta. We had a crew member who really, really saw himself in her and like had all these ideas. So we just grabbed lunch and like, you know, he was like, I think that she'd feel like this. I think she'd want to do this. And I'm like, this is great. Yeah. You know, I feel like there's always, it's like when the crew starts really imprinting on the characters and putting themselves in it, then the characters start feeling a little bit more alive. Yeah. So I think that it was something, I felt really lucky to have a crew who cared that much and, you know, saw themselves in the characters.
And would come knock on our doors and be like, I've already drawn out the next arc for you. Let me explain. But it's cool.
That actually leads nicely into another question. Are there any particular characters you feel an affinity to when you're writing them or that you feel like you've really developed and sculpted yourself?
I think everybody likes writing for Scorpia a ton. Yeah. She's a blast.
That's such a Scorpia answer.
And yes, Laura had that hair before Scorpio was designed.
I did get to pose for some board artists when they needed particular angles. I mean, she was super fun too because she's a blast to write, and then the voice actor Lauren is just like, she riffs so well that, I mean, half the stuff is ad-libbed in the show from her, but then we take from what she said. I mean, Scorpio really was developed with her, and I don't know, she's super fun. I mean, the pages and pages of monologues that we'd have to cut down, but it's so worth it.
Like half of everything she says is an ad-lib because she'll just keep going and we just let her because it's amazing. And then it's like, yeah, she'll just have gone off on her own thing. We're like, all right, let's write around that. Let's incorporate that.
Definitely Mermista. Too much Mermista? Where I am over things and then I actually secretly really care. And like, I don't want to talk about it. Oh my God. Like,
Shane says this, but she's always the person crying in every animatic. And yes, I am outing her right now.
it's like that thing where, like, if it's happy, I'm crying, or if it's sad, I'm crying. Like, there's no in between. Like, I'm just always crying.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shane's like, I'm so over it. And just like, bleh.
So now that season 3, oh, sorry, did you want to answer the question?
I know
you have an answer.
you know who I basically took over Hordak and entrapped him. That's my fault, guys.
No, so we did this like original brainstorm before we even started writing the show. It was just like, let's just get a bunch of people who I think are cool in one room and just talk about what we could do. And I remember Josie was just like, I think that Hordak and Entrapta would be good friends. And I'm like, that's weird. Okay.
And then you hired me, and I was like, well, Noelle signed off on this idea going forward.
I was like, that is so weird. Why would you think that? And I was like, yeah, all right, that's fun, though. I like it. Like,
Yeah.
so it was always like the Josie pass, where it's just like, you know.
I'm like, cool. Let's add in some imperfection is beautiful, and we're off to the races. Thank you, Laura, for letting me hijack your B plot in that episode.
I was not an Entrapta believer and felt strange about it in my episode, but now that I've seen it really play out, it's pretty beautiful. I kind of get it. It's cute.
So besides those two, has there been anything in the first 3 seasons that you've been really excited for fans to finally see now that the episodes are out?
Yeah.
I mean, you could talk about them too.
Yeah, I mean, I think season 3 is we were all really excited for this one. I think it has some of the episodes that we're all the most proud of, that were also kind of the hardest to make too, honestly. It's the episode that I wrote, the second to last one for the finale, it's Adora having this mental breakdown, and I wrote it while I was having a mental breakdown. And so seeing the episode come back, I'm like, oh God. But seeing people be as soon as you see people start to pick up on stuff that you put in and react to it and respond to it and have an emotional feeling about it, and it's okay, it was worth it. It's we all kind of really busted our butts for this, and it's working, and people are responding to it. So it's I think it's a big season. There's a lot of really exciting stuff that happens this season, and so I was just hoping that people would like it, and it's been really nice to see the reaction.
I think also the Mara hologram. I think that was one of my first weeks, was when there was a version of that, and getting to see all the different ways we figured it out and seeing how it ultimately landed. I was crying on my couch watching it on Netflix as it was airing, and I was like, yeah, it's stunning. It's stunning every single time I've seen it.
Occasionally we have records like this where it's just so Zara, who voices Mara, it was her first record with us. And so Josie had written this monologue for her to do. And she goes in and she starts doing this monologue, and then she starts crying, and then our voice director, Mary, starts crying, and then I start crying, and then Shane starts crying, and I don't know if you were there or not, but you were
I came in right in the middle of everybody crying, and I'm like, well, either it's gone really right or
everything's
really
on fire
wrong.
because of her, and she's what's going on? But no, it was
probably I
so
started crying.
emotional. We all love Mara so much. She's I don't know. She's just such a incredible aspirational figure, and so being able to have this moment with her is
Well, also no spoilers, but something cool that you guys did was you wrote the full message.
Yep.
What we've seen in the show is broken up, so we actually got the full emotional read from her and things that will perhaps be revealed.
Will you hear the full message?
Well, I have to say it's cool too. In the writer's room, you don't, or at least I personally didn't get to see final animation until I was watching it at home on Netflix. So getting to see how the portal worked and like seeing the glitching and everything was so cool for me because I didn't have a picture of what that would be until I saw it. It's really cool. So, nice job.
Did I not show you that? Oh, sorry. Usually it's just me having it on my phone and being like, look at this.
But also the leather jackets. I was excited for the leather jackets in the crimson waist.
That was actually, I think, maybe the first word said that day we broke that episode, where it's like,
No. Here's what happened. Because Mickey's one of our board artists. Mickey's amazing, and she's just like, she'll just tell me, she's like, I'm doing this, and I'm like, okay. But she, like, you had already written the first draft.
Yes.
And she was like, can I try the leather jacket? I was like, yeah, okay. So when I did my pass on Josie's job, I just wrote in that she likes the leather jacket. So it's just 100% Mickey because she'd already designed it.
Yeah,
and she's like already drawing it. So I was like, okay.
like Mickey is 100% responsible for like that dip in like Princess Prom too.
Yeah.
Like
Mickey's are like secret weapon.
yeah, like I like looked back at the script and I think I was just like some vague dance and like Mickey's like I got this, like cracks her knuckles.
So obviously this is a very harmonious writer's room, but was there ever a story point that there was disagreement on between you?
They're all scared of me.
I mean, honestly, like I think part of the reason that it is such a harmonious writer's room was like it was such a safe space. Like even if somebody like disagreed with a point or an idea, like we always talked it out, and we always knew like if people had different points of views, it was for a reason. Like if something didn't work for somebody, well, let's explore that. Let's talk about that. So like I don't really think there were obviously I think a lot of stuff was like how much mythology do we put in, how much we pull back, how much do we invent. Like I think there were a lot of conversations, but like when it came to actual disagreements, like that's part of the writing process, honestly, is being like, well, I think maybe this should be this way. And then that sometimes opens up a new door. I mean, I think, honestly, what is at the end of season 3, I remember our original pitch was like a lot more sort of just like a regular episode.
Yeah, there was like going to be a big battle.
Yeah.
And then it was like...
And then like you had come in, Noelle, and was like, I've been sort of thinking like maybe that doesn't work for us. And we talked back and forth, and then we finally landed on, I think, like, honestly, like my favorite, favorite stuff thus far.
Yeah.
Like it just made it that much better.
See, that one was funny because I actually thought that this was Liz, our director is in the front row, and like, I was like, this will make it easier than like a big battle. We'll reuse everything. It'll be easy. That did not happen.
There is a lot of us going into Liz being like, it's going to be easy, there's reuse. And then Liz having to explain to us that I'm having to draw all of reality crumbling. That's not a reuse, guys.
Every time we tried to make Liz's job easier.
Yeah, I feel like actually a lot of times there'd be times when we all really wanted something to happen, and then we'd start breaking it, and we'd all sort of realize that it like we couldn't actually do it. Like that's always kind of the thing where it's just like, you know, we're like fans of the show too, of course. Like when we write it as, you know, people who really would have loved to watch this show as kids or as adults. And then sometimes you're like, oh, I would love to see this, and you just get there and you're like, I don't really think that would happen. So it's always like a little bit of a bummer when that does happen, but sometimes it's just like, you know, I think that we kind of try and let the characters, we just try and follow the characters and see how they're responding. So that I think would be, it was less of a disagreement and more of just like, oh, I don't think we will be able to do this. Yeah. And it's always like,
we only have 22 minutes. We can't fit in every single thing we possibly could. Yeah.
We always tried.
We tried though.
So that's kind of a glimpse into the process. Do you want to go in a little bit more, Josie and Katherine and Noelle, about how a story editor works in the room and how that works with Noelle's role as the EP?
Sure. I mean, story editor, basically in animation, story editor is the equivalent of like a head writer producer in live action. So like what the story editor does in animation is like run the writer's room. Basically like I and Katherine work with Noelle very, very closely to both break the episodes, which breaking means you come up with the episode, you come up with everything that's happening in it, you write in an outline and then send it off for notes. And then we'd collaborate on basically notes on the scripts and doing what we call passes, which is just us editing the scripts over and over and over again to get the tone we want, to get the ideas we want. And then like the last part of the process is like which again, I haven't seen done on a lot of shows, and I think it really helped our show, is the story editors and all the writers come in and we watch all of the storyboard pitches, and we watch all of the storyboard animatics, and we'll give notes on those, or like there'll be a section that you'll be like, that's not quite working, the phrasing, and then like I or Katherine like basically went and would rewrite it, I'd sit down a lot with the directors and like rewrite sections to make sure we're really getting to the core of what we wanted. So like largely it's, running the room, being the manager of the writers.
Yeah, for me, it's something that, like, I think that the story editor is such an important role because it is, like, while I have sort of this story and these characters in my head all the time, there's a lot that goes into that. Like, someone has to be sort of keeping track of, like, oh, in this episode she said this, and an episode later she says this. We have to make sure that, like, everything's consistent, the logic's consistent, the character arcs are consistent. And so for me, like, whether it's, Josie or Katherine, it's like my day will kind of start with being like coming into their office and being like, so I had a dream last night. Make this work. But it is. I'm like, we wrote this thing where, like, let's say Katra was responding to it this way, but I've been thinking a lot about it, and I don't think she would. What if she did this instead? How can we make this work? And then they're really the ones who are like, okay, let me go back into these scripts. Let me try and make this work. So when you have a good relationship with your story editor, it really is that they're like, the story's in their hands. And I don't have to worry because I know that nothing's going to slip through, that a character's not going to act out a character, that lore isn't going to get lost because they're watching it. And so it's like, for the showrunner, the peace of mind is huge. So it's like, they are basically the guardians of the story. It's like, carry it to the end.
Yeah, and I think I felt really lucky. I imagine, Josie, you did too, that like the scripts we got from these writers were just incredible. And so a lot of our job is like, we're producing so many episodes that we can't all be in the same room at once. So we'll get scripts in that are perfect, but we've changed something in the episode before, so we have to just quickly make an adjustment. Yeah. But it was such a pleasure.
Yeah, no, we're really lucky to work with amazing writers who like care so much and like will add beautiful parts to all of their episodes. Yeah, it's great. You guys are great.
Laugh aloud in your office alone.
Yeah.
I think for me as a staff writer, what was so nice having you guys as the leadership was being included in a lot of stuff that I think other lower level writers never get to be a part of those conversations and processes. So it felt like there was something Noelle said, way back when, where it was like, I just want to include everyone so that when you go off to make your own shows, you know what you're talking about. Like, you know what notes to give at an animatic, you know what notes to give at rough boards, and that has been so helpful moving forward, and it's been great.
That's really unusual, especially in animation. We got really lucky, and we're definitely spoiled, I think, for future things. But getting to be that involved and have that much of a voice is really cool.
Yeah, we did something with this show where I think typically you guys would come to records of your episodes. Yep. So when we're recording the actors, they would actually be there. And if there was ever anything like, I wrote it like this, I was sort of picturing a little bit more like this, they actually had the input to be able to do that, which I think being able to be there while the actors are reading, it helps me. I mean, I feel like it helps me understand the characters better. So, and I think that having them there during that process gives us that extra, that bit of knowledge into the scripts that we wouldn't have otherwise had, So it's really helpful for us as well, just to have the writers just be like, there, always ready to help.
So since we are at PowerCon, I have to ask a little about our nods and intersections with the classic series. How do you choose what characters, place names, nods, that kind of thing make it into the show?
I feel like we always have Wiki Grayskull just pulled up in the background. And but my favorite part, Im did this in one of her episodes and it took me so long to catch it. What? But I can't actually tell anybody what it is. It's going to be a surprise. But she put in, actually this is not that big of a spoiler. She put in the characters' real names in a way I hadn't realized
Okay. I know what you're
Scorpia's real name was Linda Dareem. Yeah. And then I didn't even catch it. I was like, oh, that's funny. That's weird. And then months later, I was like, wait a second. It's so great because I feel like everyone is always going back to the original source material. We're always like, is there a character who makes sense in this role? Is there an artifact or a place that it makes sense to incorporate into the show? And then the board artists throw in their own Easter eggs where our character designer is always trying to hide Blue Key everywhere, which is great. I think everybody is always we always go back to this show just to see if there's something there that we can pull from.
And I mean, when we would do our writer breaks, we would watch old She-Ra episodes. I think we burned a hole through Flowers for Hordak.
We watched that one so many times.
We watched that one so many times.
It was just Hordak is mad about flowers. But it was that's what defeats him.
But it'd be fun. It'd be we had the DVDs in the writers' room. We had that big we had a big in theory encyclopedia with the the map that we kind of like threw up on the screen. Like, it was a lot of Wiki Grayskull, and then it'd be a lot of, like, I mean, a lot of the stuff was already, like, Noelle knew, hey, I want to use this character, or, like, the only way I want to use this character is if we do something, like, completely unexpected with them.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of stories would also begin with, like, ooh, well, this would be cool to see them pop in. Ooh, how is it this version, our version, rather than the old version?
Yeah, there were certain characters like Huntara that, like, we were all such a huge fan of her from the show that we were like, we knew we wanted to use her at some point, but it was like, what's the best way to do it? How does she tie into the bigger story that we're telling? And it's always really fun when we get to use the characters that we're fans of from the original show.
Do you have a favorite Easter egg that's been in the episodes that are up?
I'm a fan. This is like something, when we were first developing the concept of Mara, we didn't have a name for her at first, so sometimes we just do bad pitch stuff where we just have like a joke name or something, so we just called her Brittany. This was like early brainstorming days. I'm like, I'll think of a great name, hang on. But there was a character actually from another He-Man show named Mara, and I also am a huge fan of Mara Jade from the Star Wars Extended Universe, so I was like, this feels right, this feels like it fits, but so we ended up pulling a lot from that character who's sort of like, I don't think until people saw the design that we had actually like, you know, it was really this call out to this character, so it was really cool to be able to go back to like, you know, even a different version of this world and expand that lore a little bit more, because like if that exists, then like, you know, like all of these things could exist in the same universe.
I mean, it was cool. I mean, I think it was fun. It wasn't just the TV show, like the toys, the like marketing copy from the toys, the like New Adventures of He-Man. Like we like kind of like, if as long as we could, like we kind of pulled from every single bit of the Masters of the Universe lore that we were able to, basically.
It did get to the point at the end of the show where I was trying to find a name for a place and there were none left.
we used them all.
We used them, yeah. We were out.
So diving a little bit more into season 3, one of the places from the classic series that shows up is the Crimson Waste. What went into deciding to go there, and what did it really mean for the characters?
I think at first we thought that maybe the Fright Zone was in the Crimson Waste, and then we sort of changed our minds about that. Like, it felt cool to have this place that was sort of like this no man's land, dead land that like it had just completely died at some point in the past. No one really knew why. And have it be almost like a bit of a boogeyman for everybody. That's like, you know, it's too dangerous to go there. And that I think was like, you know, it was such a rich ground to have all these mysteries and all these reveals there, because it is just such a mysterious place.
And it was fun too. Like, I mean, I think season 3 was like the first season was very much like, we would call it in the room, collect the princess. Like, it was like, establish everybody, come meet everybody. Season 2 was like getting more into the relationships, and like season 3 felt like the first time we could really expand the world in like a really meaningful way and go places that weren't just Bright Moon, the Fright Zone, here's some little villages. So like the Crimson Waste was a great first step of like, here's a brand new place. It's not like anything you've seen in the show thus far. Like, and now they're stuck in it for 3 episodes. Yeah.
There's something so great. I love the like giant like dinosaur skeletons there, where it's just like, you know, I've always been so fascinated by just like what used to be here, like what did this world used to be, and seeing kind of the scars of kind of what's happened to this planet in the Crimson Waste. Yeah.
And it was also really fun to imagine like where would be a place where Katja would really thrive.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Like Josie's episode to me is one of the biggest heartbreaks of the show. Just like her perfect day, and she can't choose.
That
to
that
stay.
episode title, the production title began as Katra's best day ever. Sorry, guys. And then we changed it to Once Upon a Time in the Waste.
That's such a fun day when we were recording that too. And we were like, AJ, your character gets to be happy today for like a second.
So speaking of that, the core of season 3 is a lot of Katra's descent into darkness and deciding to sort of really take revenge against Adora. What did it take to get Katra to that point, and also how dare you?
I think Katra is like, we all love Katra. I think she's like, you know, I feel like I just feel like everyone gets Katra, because I think we've all been Katra at some point in our lives before, where it's just like you felt really hurt and really abandoned, and you know, like someone or something that you really cared about was taken away, and she's just someone who just like can't let go of that hurt. Like she almost like she doesn't want to be happy at this point, which is like, again, I think that it's like, it's something I think we've all been there at some point. And so like just kind of seeing her, like, I think up until season 3, you always sort of expect that she'll pull through or make the right decision at some point. Just realize that it's not worth it to just keep, like holding on to this grudge and this anger. But then in season 3, you kind of see that, like, for the first time, she has a choice to walk away, to be happy, to not be obsessed with Adora and winning and conquering Etheria, because it's is that going to make her happy? And then someone actually, even when Scorpia says like, you don't have to do this, you can be happy, she's right, and Katherine knows that, and she still can't do it. And so like at that point, you sort of realize that like the hole that she's digging, that's entirely her at this point. She has the choice to turn around and leave, and she can't do it. And so I think that, like, it's something, again, it's like you sort of, I love writing the villains, I think, most of all, just because they get to express something that I think, again, that we've all felt, but to this extreme that is so, like, you so desperately are rooting for her to do the right thing, and she can't do it. And then it's just like,
It's so sad.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that's so fun is like, I think every single person on, and right here are people who love the villains, like everybody's like favorites, especially Dark Queen Katherine over here, mistress of the Fright Zone and Shadow Weaver. But like, I think what's so heartbreaking about, and so why like the villains resonate so much with us is like both our heroes and villains are being motivated by the same type of hurts. Like, Adora is insecure, and she's anxious, and she wants to prove herself, and so does Catra. But the difference between the heroes and the villains is, like, the heroes see, like, they don't have to do it alone, that they have friendships, they can accept other people, they can accept the world, and our villains haven't been able to make that leap. They still think it's all on them. They still think the world's against them. Which is really, like, it's a very, like, nuanced, subtle thing, which was so much fun, and, like, a lot of our, like, most fun conversations was being, like, like, what makes a hero, what makes a villain, and, like, I think our show is really saying it boils down to accepting the people around you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
like
much of
Catra has Scorpia, who's, like, always there for her no matter what, and she doesn't even see that. Like, she can't accept that.
Yeah, so much of the show for me is like feelings of not feeling worthy. Like Adora doesn't feel worthy of being She-Ra at the beginning, and Catra feels less than Adora, and it's how they both approach that divides them.
Yeah.
I thought the season 3 too was really great because I know we've touched on the Shadow Weaver Catra relationship a lot, but I think this season really dug into the damage that Shadow Weaver's done to Catra. It's because I mean the worst stuff that Catra did this season always kind of came after a moment with Shadow Weaver. It wasn't Adora. It was knowing that Shadow Weaver went to Adora and knowing that Shadow Weaver now was with Glimmer, and like those moments were, I think, the most heartbreaking for me to watch. Was mommy issues. But I mean, like that's really, I feel like the core of where all her damage came from, and it's cool to show that in the worst light.
Yeah.
I think we wanted to show that, like, they have this relationship, and I think both of them at various times in the show have declared that they are over it, that they are free of Shadow Weaver's influence. And I guess it's just like, for those characters especially, it's always more complicated than that. It isn't always so easy to declare that, like, something that happened to you in the past no longer matters anymore. And so to show these characters sort of, like, in their own different ways, trying to figure out how to, like, deal with the damage of that, because it's like I think all of us, again, we go through our lives with the scars of things that have happened to us, and there are just so many different ways of choosing to move past them or work through them or ask for help, and and then kind of seeing the two sides of that, where Adora is asking for help and she is trying to move forward in this positive direction, and Catra can't get past it. She just keeps getting thrown back. And so it's like both of those ways are ways that real people respond to things like this that have happened in their lives. And so we wanted to explore both of those approaches to trying to create your own life and your own path.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I mean, this isn't Catra, but I think Adora, one of my favorite episodes was Shane's episode, your very first episode, Shane, because I think like one of the most illuminating parts of Adora's character is that walk and talk around Shadow Weaver, where like so much of season 3 is motivated by Catra not being able to let go of the fact that Shadow Weaver's chosen somebody else, she's been betrayed. And then that sequence where Adora's coming in to talk to Shadow Weaver, and Shadow Weaver is trying to manipulate her so hard, and like Adora's like, try again. Shadow Weaver switches tactics, try again. Like, I think really illuminated for me a lot when I read your draft, like how Adora is able to move on.
But even then, by the end of that episode, Chandelier still manages to make her really upset. Like, it's like, you don't, like, you can never just leave it behind, I think. That's like, it's like, it always matters to you somehow. And so, you know, they have made so much progress in their own ways, but it's, you know, we wanted to make it feel real. We wanted to tackle it in a way that felt true.
I think it helps that it hurts you guys as much as it hurts us.
Oh, no. We love to be hurt, and we love to cause hurt.
Yes. Another big revelation in season 3 is Hordak's origin and the introduction of the idea of Horde Prime in the wider universe. What does that mean for the show? What went into that decision, and what might it mean in the future?
Rebecca, are you trying to get us to spoil?
I
never
so
would do
much
that.
more coming to these. But yeah, again, I think Josie's like take on Hordak was always like, I would always go to Josie when we were like working on Hordak. I'm like, what's Hordak doing? I had trouble grasping him a little bit at first, I think. Mm-hmm. And then I think that day that I was like, all right, well, but like, who is he? Where's he from? We sort of know certain things about him, but like, who is he really? Like, what does he think he's doing here? Because he's only been the guy who hides in his lab.
Yeah.
And then it was like the day that we realized that he was a clone of Horde Prime, one of an army of clones, something clicked for me.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, it all made sense, and like, you know, like imp, like why does he have this baby? Whose baby is this? And I ran around the office opening everyone's doors and yelling in, oh, that's a clone, and then running away again, and they're like, what?
I mean, it really was like the clone thing. Like what I liked about our Hordak, like old Hordak was like very comedic, like from the old original show. Like he was kind of like incompetent, and I kind of loved like the fact that we twisted that. Like old original She-Ra Hordak was kind of incompetent, who Shadow Weaver ran everything for him. So here's our Hordak, who is so terrified of being incompetent. Like he's so terrified of failing. And like, no, I think realizing not just he's cloned, but he had somebody that he was scared that he was going to disappoint. Yeah. Like really,
he
like
has those
brought them
family ties
together
too. The way that like our younger characters do. He's got a family.
Yeah.
What does that mean for him and his like
And again, he's motivated by not feeling good enough.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, again, why I enjoyed pairing Entrapta with him so much is like she will just run over him until he tells her how he feels. But it was such a great vehicle because it's like, in so many ways, here's the two characters who don't really fit in with any other facet of the show, getting to do mad science together and like get to the root of their issues. It was very sweet. It's like the only time I would believe Hordak would ever open up. But like, I think once we realized that like he's motivated by the same things Catra is, by the same things Scorpia is, Adora is, everybody is, then it became like, oh, this is our Hordak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the way that sequence, the flashback is boarded and the color
Oh my
design
God.
is so striking and beautiful. It's really well done.
That was one
so
of our
Sam.
board artists. He designed all of that himself. He's actually colorblind, but he like pulled through to design. He did all the colors for that himself. And so like, when we wanted to capture the effect of his boards, we were like, we're going to do it verbatim. We're going to we're going to design around it. And, and our in-house team animated it. Our designers came up with all the assets themselves, and then, we handed it off to our in-house animators, and it came out just like, just so it just really captured the feeling of his boards, which were so evocative.
Yeah, it's like almost exactly just the beautiful like propaganda art angle he did. It was really amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam sort of boarded that like a lot of that B plot and really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
It's such a great example of how that collaboration can work, because for us it was a big exposition dump, and then Sam just like brought it to life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have one more question here, and then I think we might have a few questions from the audience. We might have some time for that, so start thinking of questions. But my last question is, at the end of season 3, we sort of hit really big moments for Adora and Glimmer, so we could talk about the heroes a little bit. Can you talk about that and what that means for them?
I think going into the next season, Glimmer has there's a big change, obviously. Something that she never expected to happen has happened to her. And a role that she never expected to have to step into, she suddenly has to step into. And Glimmer's someone who's, I think, always been pushing. She's always trying to have people see her how she sees herself, where she's like, I know I'm strong, I know I'm a good leader, I know I'm worthy of respect, and people just see her as this adorable, glittery, like, little kid, you know, and she's like, no, I'm strong. And then her mom is the one who's always like, don't do that, it's too dangerous, you gotta stay, you gotta do it right, you gotta, and so Glimmer's always pushing against her mother in that way. But I think she always expects Angela to be there, to pull her back. And now that she's no longer there, it's everything changes, you know, and it's obviously something that is going to have a really big impact on the show going forward. So yeah, Glimmer's like I love Glimmer. Glimmer's one of my favorites. She's very like I just like she's just trying so hard all the time, but she's like I like her because I feel like sometimes she's this mirror to Katra in a way that I don't think either of them would ever admit. Yeah. But like where Katra's like, you know, this secretly sweet person who's kind of has this darkness to her that she expresses, and Glimmer is the sweet person who has this secret darkness as well. And so in some ways I feel like they're sort of, you know, they're specifically very much a foil to each other in that way.
Awesome. Does anybody in the audience have a question? There's a mic in the center of the room. Feel free.
Hello.
I grew up with He-Man and She-Ra, and I learned everything about how to be a good person by the morals at the end of the story. I grew up identifying with Prince Adam and Adora because I had a lot of secrets to hide from my family as well. And so I took, you know, strength from knowing that, oh, they have secrets. They're normal too. You know, I can do that. And what you did with your show, Adora being just out there, being She-Ra, so bold, and I want to thank you for giving this generation of kids something to feel like where I don't have to hide who I am. So thank you so much for doing that. And you've been inspiring a whole generation of adults too. What I wanted to ask though was, when you were creating this, I know you had a lot of hatred aimed right at you from diehard, you know, Rachi fans and stuff. You know, how did you get through being told you can't do this? You know, you can't change what I grew up with. You know, you can't do that. You know, how do you deal with being told no, you can't do that?
I think for us, you know, we believed so much in this show that, you know, there was sort of two sides to this. There's the people who sort of, they were angry and they were mean, but you could sort of tell that they didn't have that love for the original show. And they sort of were like, they were aware of it somewhat, but they were mostly just angry that, you know, we had changed it at all, whether or not that they had that past with it. But then there were the people who did have the past. And I noticed something when I was kind of looking at those people, even when they were angry, even when they were scared of what we were going to do, I could tell that they still cared a lot, and that a lot of them seemed like they wanted to give it a chance. And so that was something that it was like, you know, those were the people that I, you know, listened to. Because when someone's just like yelling, you know, angry, mean things at you, you don't really have to listen to that. You can just walk away. But then when it's someone who's like, I'm like, I do want this person to give the show a shot. I do hope they find something in it that they love, something that feels true to the show that they grew up loving. And so, it was really, really wonderful to see, because we believed in the show so much that we knew if they just gave it a chance, that they would find something in it that they loved. And so seeing people who kept, you know, watched every season, watched every episode, even if it wasn't, you know, the thing that they grew up loving and the thing that they, you know, wanted to see redone in a very faithful way, like that was like, they still cared. And like, I think that caring, that makes all the difference. It's like, even if you don't quite see the eye to eye, I feel like there's a respect there. And so I think that, like, you know, those have always been the people that I think that who are like the true fans, who like, whether or not they like our iteration of the show, I love that they care. And I think that it means that it doesn't, you don't take it too personally, you know that it's coming from a place of love. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This is very Glimmer.
You're amazing.
So I think a version of this question was kind of already answered, but Josie, I did read that you were like the main architect for Trap Tech. I adore. And I just kind of want to know if there was like what kind of work that went into the development of the relationship and what kind of inspired that. Also, what you brought up earlier was really interesting about how you said like what makes the difference between a hero and a villain. And how they choose to let people in, and how villains don't seem to do that. But Hordak did this season, so I was just wondering what kind of like thoughts you had on that choice to develop it that way.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of my very earliest pitch was just like two mad scientists like who are sweet on each other. Yes, 100%. That's fun. But like, I think it got into the like deeper questions of like letting people in, and like the fact that Hordak does let Entrapta in. He does tell her things that he's never told anybody else. We do learn so much more. He's humanized through his interactions with her. But at the very end, he believes Catra. Like, he's still somebody who, his insecurities, his belief that like he's truly not worthy deep down inside have hit him so hard that even when there is a princess breaking into his lab, screaming at him that imperfection is beautiful, telling him she wants to be his friend, he's still believing that like bad voice in the back of his head. And I think a lot of, especially this season, weirdly enough, like while Entrapta sort of humanized him, we realized he's a lot like Catra too. I think a lot of what I really responded to was that basically speech that he does, that he feels worthless, because I think that that's something that's utterly relatable. Like, you feel that you haven't hit those highest heights. You feel like you look around and see that like other people are doing better than you. And that's something that always interests me. And I think that became a lot of like him and Entrapta's back and forth, is wrestling with that idea of failure, wrestling with that idea of, am I worth something? If I don't hit X, Y, and Z, like by this point, am I worthless?
Someone else's idea of what success is.
Exactly. Yeah. And Entrapta is sort of like learned to throw that away a lot. She's admitting that she's a failure, that science is imperfect. And Hordak's so close to actually like learning that and turning a corner, and then everything gets shut down and he's back into that dark space of like, no, because I didn't do these couple of things, I'm a failure again.
Because it's never so easy, I think. A lot of people who do have trouble opening themselves up, even if they'll do it a little bit, I think both Katherine and Hordak have done that, and got hurt because of it.
Yes.
Like how things worked out, it's not just something that can be fixed with conversation. It's not something that can be fixed with telling someone about your tragic past. It's like, it's a much bigger, it has much bigger repercussions than that. And so I think even our villains, when they are, like Scorpia, trying to be open, it's also, there's more to it. There are more obstacles in the path. There has to be a choice to be a good person, a person who creates, goodness instead of causing harm. And I don't think that's going to be an easy turn. Yeah.
I mean, I think Entrapta just leave a little reminder with the crystal.
Yeah. That was like a touch. I think it was Ray was the one who designed that little crystal. And just, I remember, because like, I don't remember what was in the script, but watching that animatic where, he's looking at the portal and touching the crystal, and like in the boards we saw for the first time what it spelled out, and it was just such a beautiful moment. It really was. I'm glad to see so many people are responding well, because like at the core of this, it's like, I think that relationship is one of the questions of our show, like how do you turn that corner? How do you, like, it's more than a conversation,
He doesn't know what it says.
No, he does not. Entrapta's not good at explaining things.
I don't think Entrapta can read it.
I think she swiped it and was like, this looks great.
Thank you. I think we have a couple minutes left, so maybe time for one or two more questions if we can lightning round.
It's another Entrapta. So about Entrapta, who I recently promoted to fieldwork. So here's the thing: your show is just so amazing when it comes to racial diversity, when it comes to queer diversity, and when it comes to Entrapta, I can't help but wonder if you are also utilizing the character to express neural diversity, and if so, then she is one of the very, very few female characters on the spectrum. I would love to hear about your process about that. And does Princess Entrapta have a runestone?
So I think that there's like, I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the panel, but again, like a lot of these characters we see ourselves in. And there was a crew member who saw himself in Entrapta specifically because he was also on the spectrum. And so it was something that was, he felt that it was very true to who he was, and he had ideas of how he felt that she would feel about where he wanted her story to go. And, I think at first I was, I think that the touch that he brought to her, of that empathy, of that, it felt so natural and it felt so right for her. And it felt like, she was in really good hands, that there were a lot of people who were kind of expressing themselves through her. And so, yeah, I do think it's something that is implicit, I think, in the show because the crew members put themselves into those characters. And she does not have a runestone.
No, she does not. I think there's a blink and you miss it line in one of the early season 1 episodes that not all the princesses have, just the ones that we see, basically.
Yeah.
But I think that's also sort of the joy of, it's not just diverse on screen, it's incredibly diverse in our crew behind the scenes too. And I think that is why Entrapta feels so authentic and sings is, it wasn't just, here's these characters on screen, like everybody on the crew, our crew is incredibly diverse, our crew is incredibly different, they all come from different places, and they were able to bring their experiences to every single facet of our show.
So is she in canon autistic female character?
I think that when it comes to declaring if the characters are canonically, it's something that I want the show itself to speak for. I would rather not speak about, assign labels to characters outside of the canon, just because I would prefer that people get the information from the show itself. But I do think that is a very valid reading.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically being a historian, I was like, but I spoke to animation studios and I'm very surprised that they're behind the cultural pulse. I feel like you guys are on it with diversity and queerness and disability and difference in therapy, the way things are talked about, like anxiety or what it means to fail or disappoint your parents. So I was wondering if you could speak to, with Netflix and DreamWorks, like how far are they allowing you to go with diversity and how far do you think you're going to go with season 4 and beyond?
I think it's something that the studio, it has to come from, I think, the people telling the story. The studio has really been behind us a lot, which has been really great to see. And there's a lot more to come as well. And I think, it's always something that it's worth fighting for and bringing it forward and saying, we feel really strongly that, Bo should have 2 fathers, for example. And we were a little worried that we would get pushback against that, but we didn't. And that was something that, the studio was behind us all the way, and everyone just sort of accepted that and moved forward with it. And it's something that I think, as writers, as, leaders of the show, it is something that, you have to make a decision at some point, sort of decide that the fight's worth fighting, and try to represent something in a way that feels right and that feels good and that feels, like it belongs in the show. And so I think that everybody was doing that, and we were all trying to create a world that felt true to the world that we were living in. So there's always more to it. There's always back and forths between various studios, executives, and things like that. But most of the time, we were pretty upfront about it. We would say we want to do this, and here's what we have planned for it, and it would come down to a sort of all right, well, show us, and so we did, and it was really great seeing people respond to that and sort of pick up on that, even the parts that were a little more subtle, and yeah, there's a lot that goes into it for sure. But it's definitely worth doing. And it was a responsibility, I think, that we took very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's our time. I'm so sorry. But these lovely folks will be outside doing a signing from 1:30 to 2:30, so don't miss that. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for coming, you guys.